You know, I'm always learning, never going to be a pro. Erik, I'm passing this on to you. So welcome, Erik and Maya. Time to get rolling. Again, just before, questions, please fill them into the question and answer box, and I will get to those at the appropriate moments. You're up, Erik.
Thank you, Stephen. And as you said, like the original kind of startup line here is kind of ending next week. That just doesn't mean this concept is over, but I promise that I will not be a part of every single topic we do in the infinite future. You'll get some breaks from my face every now and then as well. I was just a part of that startup process and having some good setting the tone a little bit, but don't worry, I'm not the expert of everything, if anything, but have some perspectives here and there. Anyways, going into today's topic, for me it starts with, and this sounds extremely obvious, but I'll elaborate. Know why. Know why. If you're putting it in as a coach to a plan, if you're an athlete doing something, know why. Because the why is, it makes sense. Well, you know what a lot of the time. You're having an interval, or you're having an easy session, or you're having a technique exercise or something, but why? It's underestimated to have that thought in your head, because if you know why, it's a bit easier to actually kind of, what's the purpose, right? You need to have a purpose of what you're doing, because there's never no purpose, or almost like if you have no purpose, that's the purpose. Like if you're just going for something random just to kind of clear your head or something, that those things happens, but then that's the purpose, and that's the goal, that's the why. But most of your training, of course, has a why in terms of performance enhancement, and I think if you know what your what was the point with it being uphill today, well, we're going to focus a lot on striding and like getting some good hours in, like some good kind of volume in that. That's why we chose this terrain. That's why we kind of did this today. Know the why. It goes into small details, like so we're going to have an interval, and I'm going to start at 10 o'clock. I need to do 25-minute warm-up. That's what I need to be ready for that. Why are you skiing 45 minutes before then? Or if you like, it's just, if that's what you need, that's why you're doing that. And anything else, there's no reason for that. You're just doing it then because you wheeled in a little bit early. Fair enough if it's a few minutes. Even after, like, I need 10 minutes cool down. Well, I guess I'll do another lap or something. Have a purpose with this. Don't just like, we can kind of hang out elsewhere, but know why you're doing things. Because having the why also kind of helps you kind of have this training focus that I think is extremely important. And focus is not supposed to be 100% dialed in at every single second. If you have a sprint simulation, it's probably like at 100%. You have to be all there. It's a full out intensity. You're trying to keep your technique where you kind of want it to be, and like it's all out. If you're having a 3-hour roller ski session, you're not supposed to be like in your own head for every single second there. But maybe you talk for 10 minutes with others. Maybe you for 10 minutes go behind someone because you want to learn from them. Maybe you go by yourself for 10 minutes because you kind of had something you want to focus on. But also when you're talking, there's a difference between kind of having a talk and having a certain kind of go, versus like starting to kind of like the conversation is more happening here and you're kind of not skiing now. So knowing the why, creating kind of a goal and a purpose with it, and having a focus kind of goal as well. Okay, I have 3 hours today. I want to work on this, and I want to kind of keep zone 1. I worked quite intentionally for it for like a half an hour when I went without balls or something like that. I think I was good in kind of skiing a little bit behind this athlete that I kind of thought is doing something good here. And I had a lot of good conversations with my teammates over the last 3 hours. Good on you. That's totally fine. But the second you come back and you don't even remember what you were, like you had no thoughts about what you were doing, you were just getting the hours. I don't really know what the big purpose there was. Of course, there was some stimuli to your lungs and heart, but you missed out on a lot of potential gains there in terms of like knowing why you're doing and kind of trying to kind of do that properly. And creates a lot of what I call dead hours. Like you can have 400 hours in a year, you can have 600 hours, 800 hours for that matter. How many of those hours were you actually doing something? more than just being outside and having like, it's not a competition of how many hours you have skis on your feet, it's how many hours you skied. And same for running, and same for this and that. So not filling up with these dead hours, which is doing this much on physiology, and the rest is like you have no idea, no development on technique or like purpose or anything. I think you're missing out a lot on your gains there without really saving any time or anything. So a bit more purpose there. I think a lot of people can get a long way with having a bit more like that. And even building into what we talked about last week, going in and like the athlete asking, like, or the coaches, depending on what the dynamic is, and maybe change it up, like, what are we doing today and why are we doing it, and like how are we doing it, like having that kind of cleared out, not just meet there at 6, do 3 speeds, not like make sure that the purpose is there. It's not talking about like having long speeches, but if it's needed to create some kind of awareness in the athlete of why they're doing this and something, sometimes it's in the situation if it's short, and sometimes maybe it's like sending out a memo or like, today we're going to focus on this, the purpose being this, this, and this. And of course, it's a bit more straight to the point in the actual session. That's totally fair. But I think we're underestimating just putting in an extra second session because like I like the number of the week now. I don't love that. Like if like I'm not saying you can't take that session and like still be progressing. I'm saying it still is a session that serves as much purpose as anything else. It should be like you can do, like we have room for one more thing. I want to do that more of this when I have still some energy left there. Great. But just filling in like, oh, I wanted 20 hours, I have 19.5 now. I'm going to add on a half an hour there, or just like you have no, there's no goal there. There's no why. So the why leading into purpose, leading into kind of knowing what the focus should be and where to focus on and where maybe your focus can rest for a second. That's a line that I think is, I think everyone knows, but it's very easy to forget, myself included, and kind of underestimate keeping up with that all the time, because I haven't said anything today so far that is, I think, news to anyone. It's more of a, that's true. That's kind of, yeah, that's right. I kind of have been slacking off a little bit there. I take myself on kind of, I miss out on this a lot all the time. I try to kind of tune back and like, do the athletes know why, or do they just put up a session and they just execute without no understanding? So I think that's my start leading here. And I don't know if you're going to ask your question or just set her up, but back to you, Stephen, which right probably turns to Maya quite fast.
Well, you know, I am going to go to Maya. I've already got some questions that I'm going to throw back to both of you as we go along, as some of the community develops some questions. But I don't want to guide Maya's perspective on this. And Maya, I know if you and I talked just beforehand, I'm not going to try and embarrass you, but you are a very persistent athlete. You've been going at this and you've had this incredible work ethic as you've gone forward. So, I mean, I can't wait for some of your insights about intentional training.
Sure, thanks guys. Yeah, so I think what I'm going to say is definitely going to echo some of Erik's comments there as well. For me in training, there are a lot of ways to get a lot of details that you can think of if you want to. And I'm, as an athlete, a person who tends to think a lot about those details, and I can get caught up in that sometimes. I think we all do that to a certain extent because for the most part, we're out here trying to be the best. And so with intentional training, I think it's really important to always keep in mind what your main goal is. And so for everyone, your goal is to race faster, which basically means being able to push hard in the most efficient way as possible. And in training, the principle of that is essentially the same. It's how am I going to get the most out of myself in training the most efficiently. Some athletes are going to have a lot of time to train, but some people are in school, some people might have part-time jobs. And so it's essentially balancing the life load that you have with your training and figuring out how to make that the most effective. With training, it's really important that every session has a purpose. The best athletes in the world and a lot of athletes that I see will talk about the number of hours that we do in a year. And that can be a good measurement, for example. But as Erik said, it's not about the number of hours you're doing in a year or the number of hours you're doing in a week. It's about the quality. And so I think as long as you understand the reason that you're doing a certain number of hours, it can be good to think about that kind of stuff, but it's about always having a purpose. And the purpose in training can be different. For me, sometimes a purpose is very race specific. For example, I might realize in the winter that I need to work on my double pulling, and so I decide to do an intensity session that's double pull focused. Sometimes the purpose in training is a lot less racing specific. I might want to go out for an adventure workout or a hike. I did that last weekend, and for me, the purpose there was to get in some good hours of training, but also a bit of a mental refresher, so that way I could come into the next 2 weeks feeling motivated and able to get in my current training with really good quality. So just because training has a purpose doesn't mean that purpose is necessarily race specific. I think the point is to be aware of the purpose to begin with. A couple of things that I find help with that purpose are just setting simple goals regularly. I usually set goals at the start of the year and then check in on those when I'm writing my training plan. I'll take a quick peek at those goals at the start of the week, and usually at the start of each month. And then another trick that I found really helpful within weekly training is actually an idea that I got from Devin Kershaw. So that's setting aside a couple workouts each week where I'm really going to prioritize my focus and my mental energy. I think we all have a limited amount of time we can really spend extremely focused on training. And so for me, when I'm looking at my week of training, I say which workouts here are going to make the biggest difference in terms of my main goal, racing faster. And then those are the workouts where I'm going to make sure that I'm not compromising my recovery the night before, and I'm not compromising my recovery after, and I'm showing up at those sessions prepared and ready to go. For me, that's usually intensity. For some athletes, those might be speed sessions. It might be a long, easy session. Again, it depends on the person, but you're trying to get the most out of yourself in the most efficient way possible. Yeah. And then, so I have a couple sessions each week where I really put my mental energy towards. And then I also have a couple sessions each week where the purpose is to relax. Usually that's cross training, running, or mountain biking. And for those sessions, again, there is a purpose, but the purpose is not race specific. The purpose there is to get in some good endurance training while relaxing. So that way I know that when I have the next real mental focused workout, I'm ready to get the most out of myself there. To be able to create purpose and choose your priorities in the week properly, like Erik said, you really need to know and learn and understand why you're doing what you're doing. Training is a learning process for everyone. As an athlete, our jobs are essentially to put in the hard work and then really be aware of the impact that training is having on our bodies and notice what's happening. Is it making me faster? Is it making me slower? And in the racing season, notice what am I doing well at? What am I not doing well at? And how am I going to improve this? Understanding this purpose is something that comes into play a bit when you're talking about athletes working with coaches. So for me, I've always found some of the most productive coach athlete relationships I've had are the ones where I can ask my coach questions. So let's say we have a team practice coming up in the week and there is a zone 4 intensity session. And I don't understand why we're doing that. I'll ask my coach and I'll say, can you explain to me the reason of this and why this session is going to make me a faster skier? And I think as a coach, there can be a lot of really great opportunities to help create a learning environment with your athletes where you can prompt discussion and prompt curiosity, really encouraging questions and discussing things with your athletes. And I think creating an environment where you show that nobody necessarily has all the answers, but as long as everybody is working together to learn more and get more out of each other, then you can achieve goals. So sometimes I might ask one of my coaches a question about training, and they might say, oh, I don't know, but I'm going to look into this and I'll try and figure it out. Or maybe sometimes maybe I'll suggest a workout to a coach and they'll say, why do you want to do this? And I'll realize, actually, I don't know why I want to do this. And I'll say, I don't know. And then we'll talk about it together and figure out what the purpose is. And so with that, it's just all about helping to understand why you're doing what you're doing, so that way you can train with purpose and get the most out of yourselves together. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
What? You're kidding me? That's it? No, I'm just kidding. Actually, you've given so much material for reflection here. This is wonderful. And I guess, I mean, things that really come out is this time availability. You know, Erik talked at dead hours, so not making the best of your time. And Maya, you really emphasize that time is limited, and you've got to know what you're targeting. So here's a little bit where I want to go to, and you've alluded this to a little bit, and maybe each of you could speak to this a little more, is how do you really target and focus on what's important, and how do you see that evolution as you go forward? So what are the means, the approaches, the strategies to identifying really what's going to be important to place that on at any given time?
I can start it up, maybe that if you're okay with that, Maya, if you don't want to jump right into it. For me, it's when I have a kind of a goal setting or work setting kind of situation at the start of the season, usually for like what do you want to focus on, it's you have a standard of like what's required in our sport. Like you never get away from endurance. There is no way you can do that, no matter what your personal qualities are. And you need a certain amount of strength, and you need like a specific, like there's a minimum of what you need to do of everything, no matter what your specific qualities are. So like, of course, remembering what sport we have, which is not strength sport first and foremost, it's an endurance sport and so on. So you have the premise of like, don't forget to do them, like nothing, some things never change. You have to have a certain amount of like endurance focus, but then of course you go in and you talk to the athlete about their strength and their gaps, where the goal is not necessarily to just stop doing the strength. You want to keep them, but like finding that balance to kind of how to fill those gaps in addition to kind of keeping those strengths, because no top skier is just average at everything. Like something keep them up, and things they try to kind of limit that being a limiting factor. But I think when you're setting that goal setting, like I want to be better classic skier this year, or even more specific, I want to be a better striding skier this year, or I want to be handling the striding in sprints better. We're getting more and more specific with a very tiny example there. My point being is still how. So sometimes when I have that, you have that goal, and like that's the goal, to kind of perform better at this thing or be better at this thing. And that thing could be super small or quite big, of course, like skating. That's a pretty big one, versus like my offset sprinting specifically, that kind of max rhythm needs to be worked on. That's a bit more detailed. That's it's a goal, but it's not like what's the work process? How? And maybe that results in you like, you know what, I'm going to have a speed session in offset with some offsets in focus every second week. I'm going to have that for the summer and see where I am and recalibrate when I go into August or something. Kind of a silly example, but like you want to target something and know why, because then if you do that as a coach and an athlete, and Maya talking to her coach, kind of, here's my plan for the next month, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? And like you go through the system you created, and like, but you're having one speed in offset, we agreed on 3. Like, oh, I just forgot. Like, it's a lot of good things coming out of planning in May that we all just forget quite fast. So setting a goal like, this is what I want to achieve or be better at or whatever. But the most important discussion you have with your athlete then, or with your coach, is how do we do that? And if it's not something you do weekly, sometimes it is like I do core 2-3 times a week or something, but sometimes it's like I need to have this specific workout monthly, and this one to support it every second week. That's a bit easier, or something. No, how? So I think to your question, Stephen, is like you have to kind of, both as an athlete, but maybe mostly as a coach, to kind of keep things a bit big overview. Remember what sport you're in. Some things never change. You can't just stop doing intensity or like stop doing any strength or something like that. There's a minimum, no matter what kind of qualities you have as an athlete. But then you have some playing around with, depending on what that athlete is. So I want to improve this thing. How do I want to improve that? And if you just have 2, 3, 4 things you want to do the whole year, it's a pretty good start, because you still have like, some things don't change that much. It's just like, I want to do a bit more of this year for summer, and a bit more of this year for the fall. At least it's like actually doable now. It's like you both have a vision of what you want to do with this focus, instead of like, it's very easy to pretend that you have a lot of time, but when you go like, okay, so I'm gonna be better at this, whatever this year. Okay, where can I mostly do this? On the hard sessions. Okay, so from the 1st of May to the 1st of November, that's 6 months. So let's say that's approximately, or pretty accurately, 26 weeks. So maybe you have 2 hard sessions a week. So like, okay, it kind of builds quite fast into that. Okay, so you have 52 hard sessions to play with now. How many do you want to do running? Maybe a third or something. How many in classic? Well, maybe a third, and maybe a third in skate, to make an easy example. And I want to work on offset. I want to work on striding, and I want to work on like continuous work, short, hard sessions. I want to do all of a sudden, like, so you're going to have 52 different sessions in 52 sessions. Well, you need some continuity as well here. So at some point, you just like, no, I need to target this. And of course, you can work on 2 things at the same time if like the design of the session is smart. I'm just saying, you have to kind of have an intention like how to do that and make that realistic, because actually 6 months is a long time, but it's not like you have that much flexibility if you're having 15 goals or 15 work areas. You have to kind of set a path. So
what I really hear, Erik, is, I mean, the planning is important, but knowing the athlete, knowing the relationship, knowing and being able to prioritize is really important. You're not
I think so.
You're not just improvising here. You have a sense from the outset, and this is an important series of follow-ups, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, and the piece where this is like everything here derails into like, it could be its own webinar, planning over here, goal setting over here. We can have all these pieces, of course, but the intentional training piece is like, then you know why you're prioritizing to do this thing once a week, and you're very intentional. That's targeting my goal to be a better double polar or whatever. I need this session every week or every second week or however, depending on the workout design, but it trickles down. So I think the intentional piece on why, and like, you get quite motivated if you're like, okay, I have a half a year to really get better at this thing. Me and my coach, we really kind of dig into it, and like, we're going to do this every week and this once a month in addition. Those sessions, you know so well you're working on that thing that you really kind of targeted.
Well,
and it becomes very intentional.
And actually, here's it's just a little anecdote. Sorry, Maya, I'm going to shift it to you in just a second, but just this morning I had a little tear in my eye when one of the athletes I work with came up and said, "Oh my gosh, did you see how I adapted from here to here to here?" Something we've been working on, in the adaptation to terrain. And I had a little tear in my eye the first time that they could say, "I finally felt it." It's like, oh, how much time have we dedicated to that? And now it's like, okay, we're a little further along. Yeah. So Maya, up to you, please. I'd like you to pick it up here, because there's undoubtedly some ideas that triggered there.
Yeah, no, definitely. In terms of figuring out, knowing how to decide what you need to work on. In skiing, as an athlete, at least, it's pretty simple. If you want to know how good you are at something, you look at the results sheet. Obviously in races, things can happen. You might get sick or break a pole or stuff like that. But for the most part, where you are in the results is how good you are. So it's pretty simple. For me, in the winter, I pay attention a decent amount in races to what I think my strengths and weaknesses are. So that ties in very closely to the goal setting that I do in the spring. I think as athletes, we're quite, in our own bubble, and part of that is you have to be to perform and race. You have to be really thinking about yourself and what you need to do, which can also make it a bit hard to see your own weaknesses and strengths sometimes. And so usually at the end of the season, I've actually done this since I was probably 14, I'll do a debrief with my coach where I'll spend probably a week thinking about what do I need to work on? What did I do well this year? These are my goals. Did I achieve them? If I didn't, why didn't I achieve them? And I'll send that to my coach, and then we'll talk about it together. And I'll say, hey, like, I need you to tell me exactly what I need to work on and be super honest. I think sometimes hearing that kind of stuff can be hard. It's, you know, we spend our lives working towards a specific thing, and to have someone tell you what you're good at feels great, but to have someone tell you what you're not good at isn't always easy to hear. But at the end of the day, you know, you're not racing to, you're racing to be faster. And if you're serious about being faster, then you're going to take feedback and use that to set goals moving forward. So yeah, I think paying attention to what you're strong at and what you're weak at, and then finding people, if it's coaches or teammates or whoever it is, people who are going to give you that honest feedback that you need to hear, that can help you figure out what you need to work on, and then from there set training with purpose that ties directly to those goals. And again, it all just comes back to racing fast. So pretty simple.
I love how you always bring it. I love the simplicity, racing fast, and perhaps we forget that sometimes. And one of the elements, Maya, I so tuned into you're talking about these sessions, these mental sessions that you're going to build in, the relaxation sessions, and having these very I hate to be cliche, but the intentional sessions, but really these targets and these things that are very categorized in your training. So we talk about this purpose, but can we differentiate maybe just a little bit between the purpose of a workout and just developing habits? And here, I'll put it in context. You'll see athletes sometimes, they get to a top of a hill and they just sort of go, oh, and they cruise it. It's a time for recovery. Or you get to the top of the hill, you're doing a long outing, you get to the top of the hill, and you're chatting with a friend, you're just talking it up, and you're standing upright and standing in the wind and stuff like that. And we know that repetition and just being getting into these positions will make things more spontaneous. It'll become that habit. Any insights how you've adopted habits over time? So I'd love to start with you, Maya, if you have any ideas.
Yeah, no, for sure. So it comes down to what training is going to make you faster the most efficiently. So for me this year, my roller ski sessions I'm trying to keep them all focused. And then using those, I guess, when you're bringing up those moments at the top of the hill where you're relaxing, I save that kind of attitude more for cross training, like running and mountain biking, where it doesn't matter as much. First of all, just to be clear, these mental relaxation sessions that I'm talking about, they're not necessarily easy physically. It could be, zone 1 or zone 2, but it's more the mental relaxation piece of them. And so it obviously depends to a certain extent what level you're aiming for and how old you are, but as a senior or an older junior athlete, our jobs are pretty simple, that you only have 1 to 3 hours a day where you really have to be focused on training. And then the whole rest of the day, you can talk with your friends. You can, if you're carpooling to training, you can catch up then. You can, if you want to talk with someone, go for a run with them instead, where you can get in a good quality workout while still talking with someone. But we don't actually have that much time where we need to be focused well. So I think keeping that approach in mind and understanding, if you understand when you're roller skiing, the purpose of roller skiing, of an easy roller ski session, is to really work on proper technique that you're going to be using in racing. And so if you're not in an environment where you feel that you can properly execute that and really make that purpose happen, then you might as well switch the training mode to a session where you're able to achieve the purpose that the workout is intended for. So really just being aware, and then, yeah, keeping in mind that it's being an athlete it's pretty simple. And so if you're someone who you know that you can't, like if you know how much focus you have, then really choosing to put that in the areas where it's going to matter the most.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks. Eric, you're weighing in on
Yeah,
this?
I'm gonna ask Maya a question actually.
Oh, please.
Well, maybe two things if it's okay, Stephen. But is it fair? Well, you basically said it. Now I'm putting words in your mouth, Maya. But is it fair to say that kind of the more specific the workout it is, like you have almost two factors: you have movement form and you have intensity/speed, and sometimes they meet up, of course. For everyone is the intensity. But is it fair to say that the more specific it is, the less you want to compromise focus for mental break kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And within that, if you're combining, so for example, at the end of a heavy training block, if I'm feeling quite tired, but I still need to get an intensity session, something that I might choose to do is switch my intensity mode from roller skiing to running, which would be an example of a session where you're able to get in the quality that you want physically, and mentally you don't need the same amount of focus to still get in a great quality workout. So it's
I totally agree. It was just yeah, no, I think that's great. Actually, I want to kind of build on off of, well, because I know the answer to this, but I wanted to get it out there in terms of like you're talking about some sessions where you're deliberately kind of you're getting a good endurance kind of stimuli, but there's not like too much structure or focus you need to have it for it. Like mountain biking, for example, it's mostly you're doing it because it's fun, and you also know it's good training for you in that fun. I know, talking to you, that you last year, I think it was late August or September or something, you actually planned a whole week where it was kind of a mental break. I think you know what I'm referring to. Can you kind of because this was planned not because like something broke the week before. This was deliberately planned to be there both beforehand, and you executed it no matter how you felt the week before. You just had that in there, and I know you emphasized that you were really happy you did that. Can you tell everyone about that, what that was, and why you're actually doing it like again this year?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so last year at the end of August, I scheduled in what I called a mental rest week. I think most people are familiar with the idea of just a rest week in general, but we all know that mental side of training is very important. And so in the training season, I recognize that for me, the closer I get to the winter, the more specific my training needs to be to the racing season, and therefore the more focused I need to be mentally to get in the good quality work that I want to. And so I've had years before where I have a great spring and summer of training, and then the fall I just feel a bit burnt out mentally and not able to get in the work that I wanted to. And so I decided to, in August, take a mental rest week. I hadn't had any problems with motivation prior to that, but it was a bit of a preventative rest week in a sense. And so what I did for that week is I still got in a normal, fairly normal hours of training. I did, I think, 2 strength sessions, 2 intensity sessions, but I chose sessions specifically where I didn't need to focus mentally in order to get in good quality. So I would get up in the morning, and I did a lot more running and biking instead. My intensity sessions were, I think, ski bounding or running with poles for the most part, because those are sessions that I could get in the physical effect that I wanted to while relaxing. I also didn't use a heart rate strap for the whole week, which was nice from a mental perspective, and also actually quite a good thing. I think once in a while, well, maybe more than once in a while, it's good to not use a heart rate strap, just because the purpose of training isn't, of course, to get a certain heart rate. It's just to get faster. So that was a good check-in for me. But the whole purpose of the week was to relax mentally while still getting in good training. So that way I would have effective hard work in the fall when I needed to.
That's so insightful as well. There's a perspicacity into yourself there, Maya, that speaks to, and knowing yourself over time as well, I think it's becomes so important. And the trust to try stuff, that's really interesting. Maya, we got a question for you. Okay, it's you speak of the job being simple, going fast, but an athlete is a complex individual. And to what extent are you reducing the frontal lobe stress and focusing on what's key to you? The mental aspect in life needs these simplifications to complex situations. Is that a technique you employ?
I'm gonna have to read this.
Yeah, go for it. I threw it out there. Well, you can
Okay.
interpret it too, so it's all good.
Okay, mental aspect in life needs these simplifications. Okay, I'll just talk a bit here about what I mean when I say the job is being simple. So, yeah, essentially, it's easy to get caught up in all the details in skiing, and so I think every athlete's of course a bit different. Some people really like to think a lot about the details. Some athletes need a lot of structure. Some athletes need a lot more flexibility. So for everyone, it's about learning what you respond to as an individual. For coaches, it's about noticing what kind of work your athletes respond to and how to get the most out of them. And so for me, I get quite into the details, and so I know that it's really important to keep things simple, but everyone's a bit different here. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if this answers the question fully, but I think it's just really about the individual and figuring out what works best for you.
Awesome. So I invite any other questions here. At this point, also, anybody who wants the PD point for the day, please type in your number into the, if you haven't been here before, haven't asked for it, type in your number into the chat. I will pick those up. And this leads me into another question I have that has been coming up. And Maya, you said from 14, the interaction with your coach has been important. I picked this up earlier. And where I want to look, this relationship between coach and athlete. And in terms of making this, this intention, this getting the most out of it, really hitting the mark. What does this look like to each of you? Like, what is your responsibility as an athlete? How do you bring this in? And as a coach, what are you trying to do as well? And how does this work? And to what point is it too much or not enough? Ooh, sorry, that's a lot.
No, but it's a good question. It's just like you can take it a lot of ways, of course, but like it's a good question, Stephen. And I think I'm going to lead on to Maya quite soon, but because I think her perspective is more important than mine in this situation, actually, because I can have these thoughts about how it comes across and if it's all wrong. As a coach, I mean, and the end result is always the athlete. Without athletes, we're just people yelling in the wood. It's kind of up, up, up or something. Like it needs to be someone actually racing out there. So focus me in again, Stephen. What do you want me as a starter?
Sorry about that. Give me your responsibility as a coach, and yeah, and how you're going to establish the good enough or that's enough, as opposed to always being there more. But you know, your responsibility towards the athlete, but also the sensitivity towards those limits.
No, we have two things there. One thing is like creating that environment that we talked a little bit about in terms of like questions and answers and like that, like kind of why thing. That's like a bit of a social piece. And then you have, of course, the physical piece, like when is it enough or when is it too little or something like that. In terms of the very physical piece, like just like before we even talk about how to communicate this, if you just like think of it as the machine, like here and down first, you can have standardized sessions. People think testing is very like you test and you know if you're better. Like if you have a good interval, you hopefully did some of the same stuff last time, right? So and even if it's an easy session, like I do this loop around the lake or something, it takes 1.5 hours normally, and I about this kind of heart rate ish, and I feel like this. If you do it 1 week and you do it faster, you feel great. Like, oh, that's a good sign. You're not supposed to speed up, but like that's a good kind of check-in. Or like I felt like it, and it was super heavy. I do this every week. Wow, this felt weird. I'm a bit more tired than I think. So you have some standardized sessions that of course will I can watch it in the log, but the athletes also know themselves, like they have a very standardized feeling on how this feels, how it normally kind of responds to this. And like today I couldn't even complete something I do easily every week. That's not a good sign for energy, of course, versus like, oh, I didn't even think about it. I did it 3 minutes faster. I usually am pretty steady on this thing without like, that's a good sign. So I think in terms of like what's too much and what's too little, the only one who really knows feeling wise is the athlete, and the only way to really show it is compare yourself to yourself over time, which of course the coach can help with. I think having some standardized sessions or like formats that you kind of get this feedback without anyone ever even saying anything, is just like, oh, that's quite a bit slower / faster or easier, like lower heart rate in the same kind of time or something. So creating a design of sessions where you have some check-ins without it being a fully test, but you get a good barometer of like this, yeah, it feels good, and compared to last week or last month, this looks good. I think that's just as important as like having a test. If you have a good interval, it can be an interval as well. Like I do this every time. I know how long I use on that loop, or like how far I get in that time. And if it's faster or the same time but easier or something, obviously a good sign. When it comes to creating this environment piece for like how to create that, I love when like, I think coaches are supposed to ask athletes what they think and why as well. Like it goes both ways. And when I get a question from an athlete that I really don't know, that's a fantastic thing. Like I absolutely know that I don't know half of what I should probably, but like when we really get in, like that's kind of true, I never really thought about it, or like that's kind of true, we just kind of do that. Why though? We're kind of both developing here. It goes both ways. It's not like an expert and like here you have the result. You're kind of discussing from an objective perspective, the subjective perspective. Here is the product, but it can be good to have this overview. And you're supposed to kind of challenge each other and develop each other. It's not supposed to be just like, do this. That's the coach job. No, it's their project. Maya trains in her body every day. I never train in her body. I have no idea how that feels. Like obviously she is the expert on that, and she needs an input every now and then from a coach. But like there's a limitation to what I can bring, instead of a limitation to maybe what she can be objective to zoom out sometimes. So it's a partnership where you're both supposed to do both. Like the athlete is also supposed to kind of challenge the other way around, and creating that like we're getting smart together here. And sometimes you go, that didn't work. Sometimes it comes from the athlete, sometimes it comes from the coach, but that's a good thing because we learn from that instead of that being like mistrust. That's when you really created a kind of communication that is development minded, I think.
Cool. So Maya, what's worked for you? Because this is the true grit, right? What's worked for you? What's brought out your best?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of working well with coaches, I think it's really all about communication. As an athlete, it's our job to put in the work, but to get the most out of ourselves, we need to be aware of our state and really aware of the effect that training is having on us. The coach that we work with hopefully can see this, but not as well as we can, because of course we're the only ones in our body. And so for different athletes, it's going to be different ways of communicating this to their coach. I typically always have a meeting once a week with whichever coach I'm working with, where we'll talk about how training went the past week, what the plan is for the coming week, including what the purpose is for the coming week, and often go over priorities. And then the coach will bring up any things that they noticed throughout the past week, whether that's comments in my training log, maybe referring back to the goals that we set at the start of the year, just kind of a general check-in to make sure, are things going as expected? And what are we going to keep in mind moving forward? So it's really about communicating with each other and trying to figure out the best way moving forward. And I think with all this, it's, as an athlete, because Glenn as a coach as well, of course, sport is inherently, it's a very, you put so much of yourself into it. So it can feel, you can feel very strongly about things at times, but at the end of the day, it's really, it's not about ever getting offended if someone brings up a contradicting idea or wants to debate something. It's all about getting faster. And so yeah, just creating a good environment where you communicate well and can have discussions and learn moving forward. And for me, typically, as an athlete, I try and bring to the table a good awareness of myself, awareness of what I need to work on, what I'm doing in training, and what I want to improve on moving forwards. And then I'll rely more on the coach to bring the knowledge to the table, or if they don't have the knowledge, to go and look for it and then share that with me. And so it goes a bit both ways. Of course, the coach will hopefully have some good awareness of how the athlete is doing, and the athlete will also have knowledge. But in general, I try and bring more of the awareness, and the coach will bring the knowledge, and then we share that and create a good plan with purpose.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap it up here. If anybody has any questions left, but I just want to bring something that really struck me, if I may, and it came from both of you. And Maya, you definitely brought this to the fore. And especially working with younger athletes, sometimes we just hammer that, oh, you gotta be present, you gotta be present all the time, and I think sometimes I've been guilty of this as a coach, and one of the things that came out is just you are planning more relaxed, detached times. You're still achieving an objective, but it's not always 150% mentally present. You have to be aware of those, the waves and the demands. And I think that really stuck with me. So these intentional plannings and attaching the proper training to the proper time, or the proper session, the proper intentions to the proper session, becomes so important once you know what they are. So what I'd like to do is actually just give the two of you anything you want to conclude with today, and we're going to start wrapping this up.
I actually want to conclude this by asking Maya a question. Like, it's digging into something just in this sense, Stephen, and Maya can wrap this up, I think. Could you tell us, because you told us that this priority thing, Maya, came from like an idea Devin had?
Yeah.
And it was basically saying some are more important than others, but I think you had like a 3-star system, or like, can you kind of just tell a little bit about that conversation with Devin and how you kind of ended up executing that idea into your own way?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, this is a conversation I had with Devin, would have been about over a year ago now. So essentially, the way that I've executed that is I'll have what are called 3-star workouts. Those workouts are the most important workouts in the week. They're the ones where I don't compromise the session, the quality, the mental focus in the session, or the recovery at all around the sessions. Then I have 2-star workouts that are still important, but in 2-star workouts, maybe the day that I'm doing them could change a bit depending on things going around me. And then 1-star workouts are the workouts that are the least important, the ones that for me mentally are the least important. And it's also in terms of the 3 stars, the way that I use this, it's about both mental focus and physical focus. And in terms of deciding which workouts I like to put as 3 stars and 2 stars, it depends on my goals for the year. So in the spring, for me, intensity sessions are always 3-star. Skiing is an endurance sport. You need to be fit. And so intensity sessions are always going to be the most important. However, what are my 2-star workouts will change. So sometimes this past May, for example, I had some strength sessions as 2-star workouts because I hadn't done strength in a while. And I knew that in order to ski with proper technique throughout the summer, I would need to have a certain amount of base strength, particularly base core, to get in that good quality work later on. In the fall, speed sessions will become my 2-star workouts because getting closer to the winter, I need to have good acceleration and quick speed for the races themselves. And then the 1-star workouts are the sessions that I, of course, for some of them, roller skiing, for example, still need to be focused on, but they're the sessions that I can switch around quite a bit. So it doesn't really matter in a 1-star session if on a Monday night I have running in the afternoon and on a Tuesday I have a roller ski in the afternoon. It doesn't matter if I do the roller skiing on the Monday and the running on the Tuesday instead. I'll just pick whichever day I feel like I'm going to be better focused mentally. That's the day that I'll do the roller skiing. Or maybe if I want to go running with a friend, I'll go with them on the day that works for them, and then do my 1-star roller ski on a different day. So yeah, it's really just about figuring out how to train the most efficient way possible.
That's the reason I thought that would be a good wrap up, Stephen. It's like it's if you want to, like, it's not like now everyone in Canada needs to do the 3-star thing, but I think it's a good idea to kind of go in some kind of direction of that, of like thinking like these things are the priority. These things still needs to be kind of a bit like the semi-focus, at least for parts of the session needs to be kind of like fully there. And these are the sessions, not that it's not important, but it's a bit more flexibility to it. Like, feel a bit more tired than I expected. I cut here first, at least. I feel like something came up. It can be school, it can be anything. It can even be actually pouring down rain. I'm going to freeze for 3 hours today. Tomorrow morning, I can actually kind of do that dry, and I can do something a bit more effective today. Like, you're allowed to think like this. So it's just like having a hierarchy and kind of making some rules of how you change stuff around, or how you kind of tweak small things based off of like knowing what's like, you don't change this unless you have to. These are still like trying quite sacred, and this like is where you kind of more flexible, and if everything just works out, you just do it as planned. But I thought that is a good kind of something to maybe dive into that some people can take back. That was why I kind of guided Maya to that question.
I really appreciate that synopsis and Maya's eloquence. So once again, Maya, thank you so much for taking your lunch hour today and spending it with us, and your generosity. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Erik, as always, the passion, the drive, it's just lovely. To anyone who's still online, I just want to make you aware, next week we will be back, but there's also going to be a special session coming up with some heavy hitters drawn in. Not that I'm diminishing today's panel, Maya, that's not what I'm saying. It's more of a surprise. It's a surprise webinar coming up next Thursday, I believe, Erik, not this week, but next week.
Correct. So same time as normal on Tuesday, and just the same time, but an addition on Thursday. I have 2 names confirmed. Do you want me to tell them?
Go ahead if you want to confirm those 2.
Yeah, so Devon's going to be a part of it, and Olympic champion Ragnhild Haga. We're working with 1 or 2 more athletes as well to be confirmed, but we're going to have a bit of a panel debate between some champions.
Wonderful. So we'll give you more information as we go this week. Maya, again, thanks so much. The joy you bring, really, but the dedication you bring is really, really refreshing. Thank you so much. Erik, be well. And to everyone else, hopefully see you next time. So long, gang.
Thanks.